These 4 videos will be a different way of looking at this situation of bastardy in Westeros by way of throwing a cat amongst the pigeons. I plan to brainstorm my understanding of the history of bastards in Westeros in 4 parts. In the first part, I will discuss the tradition of Prima Nocta, logically. Then I will discuss the Wall in reference to bastards, and then I will discuss Beyond the Wall, and then the Children of the Forest. Prima Nocta. The first night is a mostly extinct marriage tradition in Westeros. The custom states that when small folk marry, their lord or king has the privilege to bed the bride on the first night. Prima Nocta is often looked at traditionally as an act of pleasure. However, in reality, Prima Nocta is a rape. The selling of daughters amongst lords is also a form of rape. In hindsight, it is all bad. That out of the way, here I'm going to look at it scientifically as an in-universe means to an end. Ugh. Look at it this way. Say you are the leader or a group of leaders of a region, and your motivation is solely to experience sexual pleasure. Why would you set up an infrastructure where your pleasure pool is specifically the new brides of your workforce? Why would you not create a ritual based on religious sacrificial model? Bring all the women over a certain age to the castle and pick amongst them for your pleasure. You can create a fertility mythology behind it, say to bring back the sun after winter, or include fornication in a tax or barter-based system. Or you could frame it like the Targaryens did. When the Targaryens first came to Dragonstone from the Valyrian freehold, they began practicing the tradition themselves. While the first night was greatly resented and loathed in the rest of the 7 kingdoms, the small folk of Dragonstone viewed their beautiful rulers of Valyrian origin almost as gods. When a lord of Dragonstone took his rights according to the first night custom, the brides were seen as blessed, and the children born of such unions were often given lavish gifts by their father. Bastards who inherited Valyrian features, such as purple eyes, were said to be born of dragon seed, and in time, they became known as seeds. Reimbursing the small folk in the form of recognition and gifts would help to limit the insult and inconvenience associated with the first night. Ugh. The timing chosen for this ritual is as relevant as the act. Sex with young women, when there is no other man invested in the girl besides her father, who would potentially become a rebellious serf, would seem to be a better choice. Consider what happened to Gargon Cohaerus. After the conquest, King Aegon I Targaryen allowed the High Lords to retain both the right of pit and gallows and the first night. Gargon Cohaerus, Lord of Harrenhal, was infamously known as Gargon the Guest for inviting himself to weddings throughout his holdings to invoke his lordly right of first night with the brides as frequently as possible. The despised Gargon was eventually murdered at the beginning of the rule of Aenys I Targaryen by the rebel Harren the Red. Gargon bled to death after Harren cut off his genitals and fed them to dogs. Harren was only able to get to Gargon due to the actions of a servant at Harrenhal, whose daughter Gargon had honored at her wedding. However, by the time of King Jaehaerys I, it was believed to be used only rarely south of the neck. If taking the lady's virginity is the desired aspect of the act, prior to a betrothal would be more sensible. There would not exist a future husband to have potentially secretly deflowered the woman beforehand. If you take the Lord's actions as given, virginity in a marriage would not be seen as a deal breaker, so there is no incentive to wait. In addition, the Lord's act could be scheduled for a day, a week, a year, before or after the wedding. Like King Edward VII of England, Bertie, the Lord could wait until the woman had children with her husband. Small folk do not have as much vested in the legalities of inheritance, though. There are many choices that would be better than the actual wedding night with lots of witnesses to be offended that could offer pleasure to a horny lord. What most likely was the issue at hand when the ritual was created is the product of the union. In a medieval context, and without IVF, fornication is a prerequisite for procreation, so the child appears to be the key. Magical eugenics. Making a baby with the blood of the Lord with skin changer genes. Starks and Targaryens. Magical eugenics is a concept that is often referenced in the entire textual library of A Song of Ice and Fire. There also may be protection magics involved in marriage vows, set in front of a heart tree, thereby protecting the baby, but marking it as a bastard. To see what Prima Nocta was meant to accomplish, we can look back to the Starks and the Warg King. The Warg King was a monarch and a skin changer in what is now the North after the Long Night. His given name is unknown. Documents of the Night Fort indicate that the Warg King ruled Sea Dragon Point. He was allied with the Children of the Forest, but they were defeated by the Kings of Winter of House Stark. The Starks killed his sons, beasts, and greenseers, but took his daughters as prizes. What the Starks were doing then was to bring a known strong skin changer gene into the line of the Starks. What Prima Nocta did was spread the skin changer gene as wide as possible. The North, until Maester Wallace and Ned's father Rickard, had been insular in its betrothals, so magical husbandry was alive in the North. The Starks had been concentrating this skin changer gene amongst the first men ruling households. It also seems that Cregan Stark was attempting with a pack of ice and fire to introduce Targaryen magical blood into the Stark line, but he settled for additional strong skin changer blood with a Blackwood wife. Betrothal amongst the lords of the North may not have been enough to create the number of skin changers needed for their purposes. Only 1 man in 1,000 is born a skin changer, Lord Brendan said one day after Bran had learned to fly, and only 1 skin changer in 1,000 can be a green seer. Enter Prima Nocta. These lords of the North would take a newly married bride of their small folk not just to have an enjoyable evening, but to plant his skin changer seed in his peasants. Ugh. The children would be born within the confines of a marriage. It would be fed, cared for, and maybe even loved. The chances of survival of this child through childhood is increased massively. The skin changer gene over time would be spread by every person born in the North, not just the lords. The mother's blood is in the child, but without a paternity test, the husband may not know whose child it was until the child showed sure characteristics of paternity. If the skin changer child is born a boy, then he may remain with the family as a laborer and may inherit the worldly goods of the household unless a true-born son emerges. If the boy finds out who his father truly is, he may develop sympathy for his natural father and fight for him when the time comes. If the boy is not wanted, he still has a place to go and feel welcome, the Night's Watch and Snowgate. This was theoretically before the words, "You shall father no children," were added to the vows after the Night's King. Bastard children were taken to the Night Fort and the boys trained and sent on to Snowgate. Before it became a place for prisoners of the 7 kingdoms, this was a way to man the wall with potential skin changers and wargs. Boys with magic blood making a magic vow in front of a magic tree, protecting the realm from magic foes. Also remember, dire wolves were still hunting south of the wall until around the time of the dance, just waiting to be skin changed. When the lore of the North passed into legends told to children to keep them in line, helped along by the maesters, the maxim, "the North remembers," became less of a parable to the lords and more of a threat for their enemies. Passing down the rituals from lord to heir hit succession crisis after succession crisis, like a game of telephone or Chinese whispers played with 2-year-olds. The lords forgot the reasons for Prima Nocta, and then only men who today would be considered players, like Gargon, would continue the practice. Prima Nocta became bundled with grumpkins, snarks, and others, skin changers, and spiders big as hounds in myth. 8 millennia after the Long Night, good Queen Alysanne flew north on Silverwing and talked to the women who felt that Prima Nocta was oppressive. Like Daenerys, who abolished slavery in Essos, without putting any social programs in place to assist the former slaves or recompense the slavers, Queen Alysanne abolished Prima Nocta out of hand without knowing why it was put into place. Excuse me now, I have to take a shower. Thank you.